Hi there, Google. Welcome to WP-Tonic Live, episode 56, with special guest Anca Mosoiu. Special guest today, again, is Anca Mosoiu. Anca is the founder of Tech Liminal in Oakland, California. She graduated from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that's MIT, with a bachelor's degree in computer science in 1995, I think, and she brings 20 years plus of computer science and technology out here to California. We're in Nevada, though. Anca, did I get that right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good start, I guess. Jonathan, take it away. Introduce our guests. We got our. Someone's got Jonathan. Do you have your speaker on? We got feedback coming.
Yeah, it's off now, Bill.
Okay.
All right. Anca, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm going to introduce our normal panel. Can you like to introduce yourself, Sally?
Sure. My name is Sally Getch, rhymes with sketch. My business is WP Fangirl. I'm also the organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup, and Anca is the. We have our meetup at Tech Liminal, Anca's technology salon, and this past weekend we hosted our very first WordPress Contributor Day.
Oh, great. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. I'm John Locke, an independent WordPress developer from Sacramento, California, and I operate as Lockdown Design.
Oh, great. Adam, would you like to introduce yourself?
No.
Don't be like that, please.
I'm Adam Silver. I'm sorry I'm late. I actually only stay about a half an hour. Almost forgot. I'm like, oh yeah, this is going on tonight. Adam Silver. I run the South Bay WordPress meetup in Southern California. I also run Kitchen Sink WP podcast, and I'm co-organizing WordCamp LA, which is in about 3.5 weeks. Yeah. But I'm going to Combo Press right before that. So.
Woo. Hey, quick reminder: hashtag WP-Tonic Live. You can look right there on your Twitter account, and you can go live and watch it. If you wouldn't know to watch it live unless you get it from the tweet, but it's live out there.
Yeah, but basically,
we got a viewer.
Yeah. If you've got any questions, just use the hashtag, and the wizard, my co-host, Bill, will be looking at the Twitter feed, and anything comes up, we will be asking our guests and our panelists.
Let's see if there's any way I can abuse Adam.
Yeah, we're using it as a tool to abuse Adam, so that should be okay.
What can we write about Adam?
So basically, I thought we would discuss, WordPress training, and you also utilising WordPress in general educational establishments. Anca, I think you got your mic in mute, actually. Oh, there you go.
I muted myself while you guys are talking.
Radio. A lot of people would like to do that, actually. So, Anca, you've got a lot of experience, founding your co-working and your training centre in Oakland. So, what would you say are some of the things you've learned? What are some of the difficulties about training people generally in WordPress and technology?
Well, I think that it's training people with technology, and in WordPress specifically, everybody comes from a different place when they first start out. So, for example, I'm a developer, so when I started looking at WordPress, I looked at how does the code work, where do you put all this stuff? But other people are more interested in publishing or writing blog posts. So one of the things that I've discovered training people who absolutely know nothing about web development, and all the way from people who do, is that there's different approaches and different things that they need to find out. So a lot of the type of training that we do here is a lot of one-on-one stuff. We do support group style things so that there's always multiple people who are at the same level who might have similar questions. And I always try to ask people to reframe either their question or what they're trying to accomplish in different ways so that they can start to see and understand all the different components that go into building a WordPress website or being successful at using or developing for WordPress.
Right, Ollie, is there, I understand totally what you just said. It depends on their background and their experience. But is it also you're dealing with expectation and how you deal with their expectations?
Yes, the expectation of WordPress, it should be easy. I think we've all heard that before.
It's not.
Oh, she's gone.
Depends.
Maybe she had enough.
She's still there.
Oh, she's still there.
Here?
What about you, Adam?
She was trapped in an expectation.
Yeah, exactly. What about you, Adam? What's your experience of teaching people?
Oh, I don't like people anymore. I decided as of this morning, I'm out.
Oh,
I'm going to Drupal, joining that camp. No, I'm kidding.
you're never gonna do that.
No. Yeah. Is it Anca or is it Anca? How do you pronounce her name?
Anca.
Anca. Okay, make sure I heard it incorrectly. So Anca, yeah, everyone comes into WordPress with different experiences. I teach the 101 class in my South Bay Adult School, and I have 15 students every semester. I start another one in a month. You never know. I've had people in there from MIT who are really smart and don't get the concept of a database-driven website. Blows me away. And I've got people in there that know more about internet marketing or have made more money than me, but it depends on what they want to do with the tool, and that's what it is. It's a tool. So do the best I can with keeping it, moving it forward, teaching at time learning, because you're not going to know it all, period. There's no way you can know it all. Unless you're like, Morton or Matt.
All right. What about you, Sally? What's your experiences of trying to teach people?
Well, I've done a handful of experiences in teaching. I taught like 3-4 sessions of introductory WordPress classes for Media Bistro, which you record a series of instructional videos. At first it was 4 weeks. We expanded it to 6 weeks. And then once a week you also meet live with your students, and they use Moodle for interacting with the students. And I said, most of your people are like writers and editors, and don't you think it would be easier if we did a class on WordPress.com? No. We have to do self-hosted WordPress. And the first time around,
oh, here he is.
Hey Morton, the first time around, I started out trying to make everybody do a manual install, because I always install WordPress manually. I believe in that, but it was such a disaster. I'm like, no. Okay, a couple of things. First, we try to direct everyone over to managed hosting and get somebody else to install their WordPress, because these are not people who want to learn how to be developers. And so, it was an experience every time. People struggled with different things. I tried to put themes off as far as I could, because everyone will have a different theme and different questions, and you could spend 6 weeks just looking for theme if you're not sure what you want or how these things work. So it is a challenge teaching WordPress to people who may not be technical. I mean, I had one student where I had to tell him how to open a zip file. So it may be, it's not like dealing with people who maybe come from other web development backgrounds or anything, but people who come from really nothing. And it is hard. I mean, if you set up a blog on WordPress.com, that's fairly simple. A lot of people can do that pretty easily without, if they don't want to customize anything. But, it's a complete myth that WordPress is easy in any kind of abstract way versus, easier than some things we have had to deal with before.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. What about you, John? Was you got experience of trying to train people, or has it just been clients usage?
Well, clients, but also, like design partners that you work with a lot of the time. If you're working with different themes or different screen layouts, like in the admin, a lot of the time, say those people aren't necessarily used to finding what they're looking for, and so most of it comes down to listening and finding where they're at and what their level of expertise is, and then having the patience to just work with them and figure out what they're seeing and explain it to them in a way that they can easily get it. So I think a lot of it just comes down to empathy and just patience.
Oh, well, that's where I'll go on then. I see that Morton has joined us. Are you going to unmute yourself forward? Oh, thanks. Can you introduce yourself, Morton, to the audience?
Sure.
They let him out of his box.
Yeah.
I just got back to North America. My name is Morton. I work for lynda.com at LinkedIn, and I returned from Poland yesterday, so my brain is barely functioning.
Dzień dobry, jak się masz?
Yeah, no, the box is over there in the other room. I'm not
right, you're free there.
That's the Polish. I was going to speak Polish with you, Morton, but I guess not.
Yeah,
Well,
no, my Polish is restricted to vodka with a
Nice.
W.
Nice.
All right. Well, can I put this to Morton? You know, obviously, you know, you do a lot of training with Linda, and you do a lot of training face to face. I think to some degree. Do you think there's any particular? Is it anything particular to WordPress that might make it a little bit more difficult, or is it just that the audience is so wide and they have very different expectations and skill ability that you find might be one of the difficulties about teaching WordPress, Morton?
I think maybe the biggest challenge, both in teaching WordPress but also for the community as a whole, is that a large portion of the people who work with WordPress came to web development and web design through WordPress. They have no experience outside of the WordPress community. And you end up in a situation where the web community, like the broader web community, is moving in a direction, and the WordPress community is largely unaware that that's happening. And you can see that in slightly different ways. A couple of years ago, when the WordPress community started thinking about responsive web design, that was already pretty much established as a standard elsewhere. Now there's a lot of discussion in the WordPress community about accessibility, which again has been established elsewhere as a standard already. And in a way, we end up with this kind of catching up situation where we constantly have to say, like, you go to WordPress events and see presentations of content that was presented at other events 2 or 3 years ago. And at the WordPress event, it's presented as new. And I think that that's mainly because it's become an insular community. It's not intentional. It's just that when you come into something like WordPress, which is so easily accessible, so easy to understand, and so easy to start working with, it's really hard to then go, actually, no, stop. I'm going to go outside and learn something entirely different that seems unrelated to what I'm doing, just so that I get the background information I need. And you know, as a teacher, getting people to step out of the WordPress zone, I like to talk about it as an island. Like, it's like people in the WordPress community often treat WordPress as an island alone in a big, vast, open sea, while in reality, WordPress is more like Switzerland in the middle of Europe, where there's stuff happening all over the place, and you can just walk across the border into something else. And you know, there's much bigger things happening. We just have to be aware of it.
Yeah. What about you, Anca? You know, do you, because obviously you've got the centre and you do courses and face-to-face coaching, but do you combine it with utilising online resources like lynda.com? How do you mix it up a bit with what you offer? Or?
Yeah, well, what we do, well, first I want to kind of respond to some of the stuff that Morton and some of the other folks just said.
Yeah, sure.
I think that when you say that somebody's trying to learn WordPress and some of the web development techniques, most of the people who use WordPress are not web developers. So what they need to know is more about, like, how do you structure your content, how do you create a web experience that people can navigate through, find what they need, do the right things on the site. And a lot of that stuff, they don't really have control over how it happens. They have to either choose a theme or pick plugins that make it easier for them to do that. So on the end user side, you know, it doesn't matter what modern things are going on in web development. They're not going to be able to really take advantage of that until somebody builds a thing for them to use. So I would say that most of the people in terms of the WordPress community just, you know, don't have those tools available because they're not developers, and they don't need to be developers. But on the developer side, again, yeah, the people who come to web development through WordPress are definitely not at the forefront of the bleeding edge. But again, most of the customers are not really bleeding edge. They're not trying to, you know, invent new kinds of ways of doing business on the internet. They're trying to, you know, do something that they've seen other people do. So it's kind of helpful to be able to give them pieces and parts that make sense to them in their context. So to that end, yeah, we do recommend people that they watch online videos or go through online learning programs, and then when they come to us, they might have read about here's what responsive design is, or they might have read about here's why you should use this much stuff in your meta description on your page, but they don't really know how to execute on that. So we help them take that sort of information and turn it into something they can use in our one-on-one sessions. So yeah, so we ask people to review or read or watch or any of that stuff that they can, and then we put that into context with them, so that they know how to take that tool and then apply it.
Yeah, so that's great. What about you, Adam? Because I know you deal with the kind of business client, and then you have your training sessions through the meetup groups. Do you think is it just the diverseness of the group, or because obviously you've got a very mixed group. You've got these business people that just want to get something up, and they want for for expense and other reasons they want to do. And then you may have people that actually want to learn more and maybe looking at it as a second career.
Yeah.
So
it should be a first career. No. It's tough. It's a balance. I've learned in the last year about the meetup that I run specifically to be very specific in the topic and how I present the title of topic. Because if I don't, and it's advanced, or if it's intermediate to advanced, we'll lose people quickly. They'll show up, and if it's a custom post type that they're not ready for, they're not ready for it. So I'm very, very clear in the subject matter, or the title of my meetup topic, or I try to be. Or in the description at least. I'll say, here's the topic, now go into the description. This is what this is going to be. It might be a little bit higher level. Come and learn. You'll still learn something. We'll still have some network, some other discussion. But, we're not big enough to split into 2 groups yet. Someone's mentioned that, but there's only a handful of advanced, and majority of people are beginner intermediate. As far as the businesses that I work with, it's a good question. They want the basics, to know how to do the basics, and it kind of goes back to the students. In my class, I was asked, why are they here? And most of them are there for running small businesses because they've been burned in the past by no one on the panel is under 25, right? They know lock okay. So everyone's over 20. So been burned by young people. I was there once by 25 and younger because they bid a low price, $1,000 or less, to do a site, and they got burned. So now these small business people take my class. They want to learn the basics, to know the questions to ask. And I pull back the curtain on everything. Say, this is what you pay for X, Y, and Z. And at the end of the 5 weeks, if they want to hire me, they can. They can't hire me for 5 weeks. But I will tell them upfront how I charge, everything in the business model. More often, I pick up a client or 2, that's fine. And even as a consultant for hourly, I might pick up a site, but not always. I don't rely on that. They need to know the basics of where to find stuff, how to find stuff, who to trust, the questions to ask, so they can run their business better. Beyond that, if they get large enough, then they get to bring somebody else in to manage it for them, either do their content, to do their backup, security, maintenance programs, all that kind of stuff. It's a separate level that they're not ready for. But it's knowing your audience is the key, I think.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. Anca, so if you're looking, if you're not that kind of business owner, that basic person, but you're looking for web development to become a kind of second career, what's the realistic time? Everybody's going to be different, but what are the basic things they need to learn if they're looking to use WordPress and become an active developer? What do you think? What do they need to know, and how realistic do they have to be?
Well, it depends on what career they're starting from. So anybody who's coming to WordPress from a design career is going to be a lot more successful than somebody who's coming to WordPress from a career that doesn't involve, design or planning or user experience. So assuming that they're coming from design but they don't know web development, or maybe they built HTML sites before in Dreamweaver, the main things that are important is to understand where the different levers of control exist within WordPress. So when you install a theme and you look at the preview for the theme and you see something specific there, it doesn't mean that your website is going to look like that if you don't know how to create the content or configure the theme in the right way, or Well, people themselves are not very precise. So they see 2 columns and they think, surely we can have 3 or 7, and that's not always possible with the choices that they make in a theme. So I think that the most important thing for them to know, and ultimately, like, the more they know, the closer the closer they get to using a theme that's very bare bones, and they do their own CSS, and they might like use their own PHP, stuff like that. But I try to get them in with, here's how CSS works. You go here and you do this with CSS, and here's how you use the web inspector to understand what's going on. And I have like several designers who've been coming for a couple of years and are getting much, much better at figuring out how to tweak the CSS on their themes. And then, then how do you change the structure of your site? Well, if you want to put a widget area in the middle of the home page where there isn't one before, how do you do that? So I think it's really important for them to understand the components that make up WordPress pages, how sidebars and widget areas work, how you can organize and sort things by posts. So category pages, themes that give you the ability to put posts for certain categories in widget areas so that you can create these multi-column pages that let you put lots of things on them. So knowing how to use the WordPress widgets, knowing how to apply the leverage, knowing how to do a little bit of CSS, I think is really important. And then as they want to create something extremely specific, that's when they really have to get into the PHP part. And what we've been doing here, and then just the last 6 months, we've really ramped this up. We've gotten a lot of people using the Genesis framework, and am I allowed to talk about how awesome it is? So, I've got like 10 people who started off with like, I don't want to learn anything. Now they're all like, oh, I can do the CSS, no problem. And so we use Genesis because it's kind of bare bones from a CSS perspective. You can do a lot of things with it, but they provide a lot of really easy ways to, and I say easy, but it's qualified. It's not easy for everybody. But they provide these like little code snippets, and they make it very simple. They tell you where to put them, and then what the effect those things will have. You can exchange components from different child themes, which is really nice. So I'm really like trying to teach people how to use a toolbox that has like half-built Lego things in it that then they can assemble together.
I got to break in real fast. I
thought the wizard would
break
do
in. Genesis and Dynamic. 2 years. Best thing I ever did was start off 2 years ago with Genesis. I'm stuck with it in Dynamic. Showed Jonathan how to make a child theme the other day with Dynamic.
I'm so impressed, Bill.
One question I'm going to pull back.
Yeah.
Anca, what do you think of using like Genesis with Dynamic, of course, and then Beaver Builder to build the pages? I'm looking at that, and I teach the newbies in WordPress around here, which Jonathan laughs at me when I do it.
Well, I've never used Dynamic or Beaver Builder, so I don't know what I think about it yet.
Anybody ever done anything? I thought there's a way. That's a page builder basically, but Dynamic, of course, is your framework, is your page.
Yeah, I don't know about the two of them. I've certainly heard people talk about using Beaver Builder with Genesis, but I don't know that that's also in combination with Dynamic.
You can use them both.
I think all of those things that are drag and drop. I think everything that's like a drag and drop, design your page, that is the devil. That is not.
If you don't like Beaver Builder, Dynamic is not really a drop. No. It's a page.
Yeah, they can add a lot of overhead. The Beaver Builder guys are supposed to sponsor one of our meetups one of these days, and the one thing I've heard about it that it sounds good to me is that if you deactivate it, you don't just like suddenly get a collection of shortcodes on your pages. Your pages actually still work as pages.
I think that's a great point, Sally. I understand. I think it's a very difficult area because I understand Anca, because basically there is a bit of a delusion. You will get to a certain stage where you're relying on these tools and you're going to find yourself a bit stuck. But on the other hand, it can help you get something up and running, and then if it's doing what you want, you could hire somebody. So there's a lot. I'd like to move the discussion on about higher education, and there's a lot of universities, community colleges that are looking ever more to put courses online. It seems to be a driver to put as much of the courses online as possible. And I just want to ask is it still, I hear a lot of people say they like the convenience of learning online, but also there's some problems about online courses and the quality and the experience of students get from it. And I like to ask Morton, do you think is there a bigger problem about doing online education and structure peculiar to the method, or is it just cost and time? What's your feeling?
We talking about higher education here, like Khan Academy type stuff, MIT? Because there are two very different conversations about this, right? You have like the services that are akin to what I work with, which is online training built specifically to be online training, where everything is bite-sized. We design courses with the intent of allowing people to learn things on their own terms at their own pace. So that's, there's tons of companies that do this. We were the first company, we are the best company, blah, 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 Donald Trump, etc. But then there's also other companies, right? So there's something else called MOOCs and MOOCs, which are these massive online, I don't know what it stands for, something. It's a fantastic acronym. So all these big
open online course, but I'm not
massive
quite
open
sure.
online course, I think. And basically, what a MOOC is, you have an academic institution, say University of Tree Castle, I don't know, some random university somewhere, that decides that they're going to put their courses online. So you can then sign up for the course and then basically take all the classes online instead of going to class. So you could go to MIT without physically being in Massachusetts, right? What they see with the MOOCs is that you have about an 85% drop-off rate within the first 2 weeks or so. And it's simply because taking an online version of a classroom educational class is a nightmare. It's just because you have like a professor in the front of a room talking to a webcam in the back of the room, and then you have some distributed materials and your own reading. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it was never designed, the classroom learning was never designed to just be recorded and published online. And that means if you are fundamentally interested in a specific topic, let's say some advanced math or philosophy or whatever, it's good. You can go into one of these services and watch a single course on something. But as a form of university or college education, it's proven to be very ineffective. That is solely due to the presentational style, though. I think if a university decided that they were going to do an online version of their classes and formatted their content to be an online type content with interaction and everything else, it would work just fine. It's just a matter of realigning how you're doing the teaching itself. Now, what I've seen a lot of lately is this conversation about how I think a lot of people have realized there's money to be made on education online. So everyone is now publishing articles about how you can set up your own website where you can do video training. I can tell you from experience that doing video training is a lot harder than you think, not just in terms of creating the content, but also in terms of production. It's not simply sitting in front of a computer and waving your mouse around. You have to really think about it. And it
or
doesn't
not
mean anyone
waving your
can
mouse
do
around
it.
so that you can make the edits.
Yes.
This doesn't work.
There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, so it's not like something you can just rattle off and do. It's a job like every other job. And there's also a lot of infrastructure issues in there. Now, we have technology that can make it quite easy. There's a lot of video hosting platforms that allow things like that and stuff like that. But it's, if you want to go into that, you have to actually make a conscious decision to say, I want to do this. This is my job now, to make online training materials. It can't just be some sort of side project you're doing every other week or something like that, because it simply won't turn into what it needs to be to serve the people who will pay you to get access to the content.
Yeah, I think they're great points, Sally. To kind of see, in Britain we had an institution called the Open University that utilised television. It was started in the 60s, and it has really built up and educated people to degree and master level, but used television, but used a hybrid where you used online television courses, radio, and then it would have like monthly, or in the summer you would go and you would have a more classical educational experience for 4 or 6 weeks. So what do you think, Sally? Is it that is it a cost thing that they just go into it to kind of cut back on costs? And
well, I don't think it's necessarily that universities are cutting back on costs this way. Is they often make these courses, for which their students might have to pay big bucks, available to people for free in these MOOCs. But the thing is that what part of what you're paying for with your tuition is the opportunity to interact with the professor, and the fact that you're taking the exams, and you've got the accountability and the interaction. And I've looked at and used some of the LMS plugins for WordPress, and many of them have an opportunity. Possibly all of them, in fact, give you the opportunity to put quizzes as part of your thing, and some of them to accept uploaded assignments and that kind of thing. Because if people are not, in most cases, if people aren't practicing or doing things, they're not likely to be developing skills. Now, I mean, I have owned and listened to more courses from the teaching company, which I think now just goes by Great Courses. They were great courses on tape, and then tape started to be obsolete, and they were courses on CD, and they're courses for download, and they make video ones and audio ones, but I always got the audio ones, and I would listen to them while I was driving before I got into podcasts. And you learn stuff, but it is a more sort of passive absorption. If you don't listen to them all several times through, you're going to forget details, and you're not going to, you're not like doing additional reading assignments outside. You're just getting the lectures. So you learn something. You know a lot more than you used to, but you don't get the same classroom experience. And I think Morton is right, that if you really want to have successful online education where you can award people degrees, you have to set things up especially for that environment. And you're not going to be able to handle thousands and thousands of people at a time, because the universities don't have the staff.
Yeah. I'm going to ask John. John, you got into web development as a second degree. How did you and I think you just, you started doing, websites for yourself and friends, and then you built it into career. How did you learn? What was the process for you?
Well, for me, like when I first started, I actually went to online school for almost 2 years, and as far as that, there is like access to a professor where, and it was like kind of hands-on stuff. I mean, my big complaint about that part of it was a lot of the courses were like the states that accredit universities, like a lot of the courses were like really unnecessary, and it was like a lot of cost. The stuff that I did learn from like online university it is out of date too, because the accreditation process for universities it goes through a process, and it has to be approved by the educational organizations, and that takes time. Now, on top of that, I mean, I also did things like lynda.com, and I did things like Treehouse, which I think are like really amazing as well. But I think it's also really easy with something like Treehouse to do like quizzes and be kind of passive in how you're learning. And I think to really get a good web development education, it's something in the middle where you have access to someone who's like mentoring you. You have more hands-on stuff. But I have to say, like, with Lynda, Udemy, Treehouse, the video production there's a lot of investment there. and you know, the production, as Morton mentioned, is top notch. You really have to like think about what you're teaching. You have to like write out the courses. You have to have a whole team doing production. But I think there's a lot of value in those. You just don't get the one-on-one that you do with the university. But I think the ideal solution would be somewhere in between.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think, Adam? What do you think how it's? Do you think there's core problems, or is it just a thing that's developing and it just needs a bit more time? And
it's a great question. I think, and I have an opinion on this. I've had this conversation quite a few times recently. I know that I could have a much larger audience if I recorded, and I have recorded my class all 5 weeks at one point, just to have it as reference and maybe go back and watch it. And I stopped after the first half hour. I don't need to see me, that's for sure. But if I recorded it, if I somehow set up my studio here and really record, I could have a much larger audience and charge more or have more income. But truth be told, I like the interaction. And I think that's key for what I do and the way I also learn. It's that two-way road. And when I do a seminar at the SBDC, I'll do it for 2, I'll do it for 20, 30. 2 is doable, but 20 is better because there's more energy, more questions, a little more, I don't mind going off track. I bring it back based on the class at hand. Anyway, it's really about, in my mind, you have to, I like the energy. I like to be able to be in person. That's what people come for. I mean, the class I teach is relatively inexpensive. It's to the adult school. It's a great deal. My class is always sold out for the past 3 years. Very fortunate, knock on wood, very fortunate. Because there's cutbacks. If they don't have enough students to take the class, classes get canceled. So there's a demand. So I might actually, there's always a talk about adding a second class, but then it's up to me if I want to do another night, because it's nights for me to do it. I like the interaction. I like talking to students, and I go out of my way, and all of my students get a sandbox to play in. They get access to me for 5 weeks. Any email that they ask, I answer all emails, etc. So, yeah, I think the other thing is, I just read a book about a guy who took the MIT courses online in 1 year. That was he did it for a whole year. It was called, here it's actually, The Happiness of Pursuit. There's a little plug for Chris Gillibo. I like his books. And he spent a year, one of the guys he had studied in here, took a year, took all the classes 1 year, or the mathematics, whatever it was, and he passed all the tests. And now he has it. That was his pursuit for the year, which is fantastic for him. But he lost out on interacting with professors and having conversations with classmates and students and having focus groups and stuff like that. Even on even mathematicians. And anyway, I still think in-person learning, training is still stronger. I don't know how I want to word this. It has a lot more, to me, has more value in-person training and more vested if people are paid money to come than doing a class online. Doing training online is different, like Morton said. If I take a Linda class, that's up to me to pay attention and put something in practice. But if I want to really get some feedback, I need to be with people around me. So.
Yeah, I think that
it's on the money.
Sorry. Go on, Morton.
I love Linda, and I love Morton.
Go on, Morton.
I've been in a conversation with a bunch of people in higher ed here in Vancouver about this, because the local government wants to invest a bunch of money in getting more people into our industry. And one of the big challenges that large educational institutions have, like universities, colleges, high school, what is it called? Universities, colleges, and polytechnics, is that they have a specific level of accreditation. So that when you pass a class, then you get some sort of credit that says you now know this. And to get that accreditation approved takes about 2 years. So you can imagine if you make a web development program, it takes 2 years before you're allowed to teach that program. 2 years in the web development world? I mean, responsive web design is 5 years old. So 2 years is just ridiculous. And what ends up happening then is the teachers will deliberately make these extremely vague definitions of their programs, so that instead of saying we're going to read this book and this book and this book, they give some very undefined definition, and then the curriculums can change on a yearly basis. But that makes accreditation extremely hard. So what ends up happening is you get this branch off hybrid thing, which is the boot camp schools. And I'm sure you have them in every single major city. We have several here in Vancouver. The boot camp schools are generally like 6 to 8 week long courses that are extremely intensive, where you often pay $1,000 a week for the school or more.
Right.
But they're pretty much guaranteed a job because they're put into a real situation working with real apps or real websites that are exactly as if they were working in a real agency. And I think what we'll see over the next couple of years is that the universities and the other big schools will start trying to adopt some form of this boot camp type atmosphere into their programs, while the boot camps and everyone else will try to move more of their programs online so that you can reach more people. Because the problem with these boot camp schools is they'll take in maybe 8 students or 10 students. They can't handle more than that because they're so intense that you need to have everyone in the place at the same time. Adam's gonna leave.
No, not right now.
He's so horrified by the idea.
Oh my God, I gotta go. No, there's one up by me. There's a boot camp, and there was like a 12-week program, 8 hours a day. You know, it's like something like $8,000. You know, it's crazy. But
you want to take it, right? You're like, yeah. I want to try that.
How much would you charge for 8 hours a day for 12 weeks?
Yeah, I'd like to bring Anca into this. They've got some broad questions here. First of all, what's your feeling about these boot camps generally?
Well, I think boot camps are really awesome, and I'm working on a e-commerce with WooCommerce boot camp right now.
Me too.
So, oh, sweet. We should talk about this offline. But yeah, so we're actually hosting a boot camp here at Tech Liminal for the next few months, and just watching the energy that goes into creating the experience and how they're looking at what they should learn, and going and talking to people in industry and saying, hey, what do you think people need to know? Is it Angular 1, Angular 2, whatever that is? And they're trying really hard to give people this extremely up-to-date information so that they can do the job as soon as they get out of the boot camp. But I can say that I learned like zero practical programming from my MIT education. But I learned how to learn programming languages. So when I got my first job, I had to program in something, and spent the first couple of weeks going, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" And then I figured it out. So
can I ask
wait, back up. You went to MIT?
I did.
And you learned nothing?
I clearly have to go then.
I learned a huge amount, but I learned like zero practical. Like my best class that was about how to collaborate with other developers, we used a language that the professor invented that is not used anywhere. Now they're doing that class in Java, but that is not important. I mean, when you're trying to teach somebody concepts, you don't need to teach them the specifics. And I think that there's kind of this challenge, both in terms of online education and practical skills training, about how much underlying concept you need to know before you can be effective. You don't have to know what object-oriented programming is, or how to do all of these crazy algorithm questions they ask you when you go to interview at Google, if you're going to be a junior developer doing something that is sort of fairly simple. So you can become an effective developer, but you're going to sort of hit a ceiling, and that's where you have to really get to know more about the concepts. So you can.
You say that what does the term developer in 2015 really mean now?
One, two, three.
No, that's what I really seriously. What does it really mean?
You ask 5 people and you get 5 different answers. I'll tell you right now.
It means everything. I think WordPress developer is like, what do you like? People come to me and say I'm a WordPress developer, and they can barely spell CSS, but they can build websites. So that's okay.
I'm not making a shirt that says I can't spell CSS, but I put a web developer. That's my shirt. I'm putting my shirt together for that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I gotta write that down. Hold on.
Yeah, but that was actually a serious question, actually, because especially when you're dealing with smaller clients or medium clients, they do expect. I say to people now, I'm a consultant, but I actually know the technical side pretty reasonably, but I've got people that work for me that do more of that now. so I'm more the kind of deal. But the broad questions I get asked from business development to marketing to the technical. It's just unbelievable. So I really don't know what to say. But I'm probably going off track here. But what I was going to ask you, do you think that a kind of, because I'm not sure if you're aware of the Open University in Britain.
I've heard about it. Yeah, no, I've heard about it. I've read a lot of stuff about online learning, and we have the Bay Area Free Public School here, and there's some like free classes to learn to be developers, and all this stuff that's going on. So
but do you think, because you got all the costs of going to university and all the politics and social issues about should education be totally free, or I don't think the particular
I'm not sure that subject is even worth discussing in
America. Yeah, no, but I don't. I think for various reasons, a lot of universities they are gonna have to change their structure. So, do you think they're gonna go to a kind of hybrid where you have online courses and then you have literally meetups where you go back over weekends or 3 or 4 days to try and get that face-to-face input from your professor? Do you think it's going to go that way?
I think, absolutely. I think that's exactly where we're going, and partly because you can get a lot of great information from watching a video about how to do something, but then to really put it in context, talking to a person is the fastest and easiest way to go.
All right.
And I think real quick, I have to go real quick. I think my last comment, I think Donald Trump, when he becomes president, will fix all the education problems in America.
Okay.
Gotta go. I'm totally kidding. I'm not a fan. Okay. I gotta go.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll see you in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just ask John John, do you think those 2 years where you were training, if it had been a hybrid where you've had the online plus you could have gone to kind of boot camp where you'd be in a group and do you think that would have been in some ways a much better experience for you?
I think it would have been a lot more beneficial because I think when you're around other people, you're learning how to collaborate, and I think more when you're in an online classroom, you're more just all kind of on the same level except for the person who's teaching you, and there's only so much attention that they can give, like each individual. But I think when you're actually like working together and putting something together, I think that's a lot closer to real world experience, and I think that would be a lot more beneficial.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, right, sorry. Sally, I think, my personal opinion, really effective higher education is really tough. To really have courses that even the traditional online, it's just really tough to get something.
Teaching is very difficult, and I was lucky to do my undergrad at a place that emphasized teaching, and I went to graduate school in a research university, as one does to get a PhD, and I was just horrified that none of my professors could teach their way out of a wet paper bag with a flashlight and a map, but that wasn't what they got paid for, really. And so, I took a couple of kind of optional, go for a weekend, courses on how to teach, and how you succeed in graduate school at that level is to be very self-directed and, figure out what you need to know, so yeah, it's hard to teach anything well. And it takes a lot of practice. And when I was teaching at the University of Warwick, I changed my classes a bit every year based on what I learned in the last class, and I did the same thing with the Media Bistro classes. And they were always sort of annoyed with me because I you know, I wasn't reusing the videos I made the first time. I had to make new videos every
I've just
time.
got to intervene, so I'm laughing.
The chat is hilarious, yes.
Yeah, we're getting some. You can tell he's got jet lag because he's making some comments here. But come on, Morton. You know.
Sorry, I'm just ruining everything.
Yeah,
Sally was having some good points there.
Yeah, she was, but you were making, you know, but so Morton, you know, where Linda, have there been there must have been some, I'm not asking any trade secrets here, but there must have been real discussions about how you improved the experience and the feedback. So, in general, what do you see the future of online education? Is it mixing it in a hybrid, offering online courses, but then in kind of larger cities you have drop-in centres? Is that the future kind of hybrid model for the traditional universities and the online companies mixing, or is it just the quality of the online that just get better?
Let's see.
Only a small question.
I will not answer your question. I will say something else instead. No, so what I'm seeing, and I can speak to this from the perspective of teaching at a university. What I'm seeing is that a lot of universities are buying external services, like, for example, lynda.com, to offload some of their base training. So I teach at a design university, and all the students there, they get a Lynda subscription for free. And then the teachers will come in and say, next time we're going to talk about advanced, adjustment layer techniques to make whatever kind of paint styles, right? And so before that, go watch whatever DEEK course that talks about adjustment layers, so that you understand the technology before we come into class. And then in class, we'll talk about specifically how to apply this. And like Anca is saying in the chat, that's what's called flipping the classroom, or the flipped classroom model, where you basically have the students take the class or take the lecture before they come to class, and then in class you spend time actually focusing on applying what you've learned. And I tried doing that myself when I had my classes in the spring, where I would assign my students, instead of having a book, I would assign them different types of online courses or videos from WordPress.tv or whatever, and then have them watch that before they came into class, and then discuss what they had learned in the meantime. Now, the challenge with that approach is it actually requires the students to watch the courses, which is surprisingly hard to do in the beginning. And the only way you can really get them to do it is by honestly telling them that if you don't watch this, the next class will be of no value to you because you won't understand anything. And eventually they'll get on it. And it's easier
I used to have trouble getting students to do the reading, and with one class I ended up just giving them a quiz at the beginning of every class on the reading for that week, and it finally forced them to do it.
But that's what I was going to say. Like, video
takes a long time.
Yeah, video is a little bit easier to get people to do than reading, because it's less likely to get the boring level is much lower on a video, because when people read, they often sit there and they read and they go, "This is work." So they the voice inside their head when they're reading academic text is a very boring voice. It's like, right? But if they're reading anything else, it's fun. But when they're reading academic text, it sounds like the boringest person on the planet. And when you have a video, at least it's a little more interactive. But I think what we'll see moving forward is a lot of these, schools will start adopting the flipping classroom practice, where the teachers will start recording the classes before the class, having the students watch them and go back. Incidentally, we have a fantastic course on lynda.com specifically about classroom teaching using flipping the classroom. Entirely separate from this. But I think we'll also see a lot more focus on this idea of students learning things on their own and then coming together to work on things. Because what we're observing is that the companies that hire people, especially in our industry, are more and more requiring people who don't necessarily know all the technologies, but know how to, first of all, learn them, and second of all, integrate into a group of people who are already working with something. And those things can't be learned either by sitting in a classroom and listening to someone, or by sitting at home and listening to someone. It can only be learned by actually working with other people. Now, that working with other people can happen online, but it needs to happen. Like, you have to actually interact with other people. It can't be simulated, and that's probably where things are headed. But with that comes cost. So it's a tricky proposition.
I mean, it is kind of like Anca said about learning how to learn things. I mean, all of my education is in Greek and Latin literature and language. I have never formally studied any kind of programming. I started hand coding HTML in the 90s, by reading, Teach Yourself HTML in a Week and just doing it. But the thing is that I was a scholar, so I learned how to do research. And this is an incredibly helpful thing to me as a developer because, I also work with Genesis. There are, beaucoup de tutorials and code snippets and things out there about how to do anything. So I know how to find the information if I don't know it already. And that's something, it's like you have to teach people the study skills and the collaboration skills, and then, they can pick up changes in technology if they stay on top of it.
And that's what a proper arts degree from a university gives you, is the ability to understand how to parse information or source and parse information and then verify it, right? That's why all these extremely smart people in the world all have art. Everyone thinks that the arts are a waste of time, but everyone should invest in the arts because that's when you learn how to think.
Oh, can't have that. And it's America, Morton. They're not into that. I'm sorry. So basically, Anna, I was going to ask you. I think I'm not saying it's easy. I think it's HTML, CS, especially CSS. It's a strange animal. I know some high-level developers that hate dealing with front-end development. They actually despise it quite considerably. They just can't wrap their mind around it because they're dealing with CSS.
No, they just haven't the patience for it, is what. CSS mostly takes patience, not skill. And, if you are a developer who works in a compiled language, it's sort of like your code and you know what your code is going to do. You don't have to keep doing these little fiddly back and forth, is that working yet things.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, Anna, do you think that when it... God, I'm trying to answer a question here. Basically, when it comes to CSS, HTML, I think anybody can probably learn it if they're prepared to put their hours. But when it comes to actually like PHP or JavaScript, a scripting language of a higher level, do you think anybody that's really committed can still learn it, or do they need an actual a kind of bit like music? You need some internal ability, or it's gonna be really difficult. Or do you think now that anybody, even PHP or a high language, can learn it if they're committed? What's your feeling around that?
I think that absolutely they have to be committed to learning. And CSS and HTML to a certain extent is pattern matching. So people who are good knitters are great CSS people because they do a lot of pattern matching and stuff. But and even on the PHP side, there's a lot of stuff which is just copy, paste, repeat. Make sure you don't screw up the semicolons. Make sure that you use the right variable names. So there's a lot of stuff that's like that. But then when you're thinking about how do you model a problem so that you can develop the right software to do it, that's not something that you learn. You don't necessarily get that at the beginning where you're just learning how to make something orange or underlined. But thinking about object models and deciding what kind of custom post types you need in order to be able to effectively deploy an event management system, or what I'm actually trying to build for a university, which is a repository of courses and documents that they need. So we're trying to model the problem. That's more of a computer science, more of a design kind of thing. It's not just a coding thing. So, and you can do all of these things in almost any language. So it's not the language that's the problem. It's the developing the right thought patterns and the ability to build on those.
Right. So I just want to pin because I want our viewers, because I saw it as about education, but also giving some of the options to our viewers who might be intermediate or people that are beginning, about some of their choices and the things they should look for on online training. And I think we've given a bit of that. But to recap what I thought you just said, there are certain patterns, but you feel as long as the person's got the right attitude and the time and the commitment, they can still, most people can learn a computer language.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. There's like a couple of things you have to get your mind over, and that's basically algebra. What's a variable? Once you get that, you have a lot more power. Yeah.
Well, I didn't because I suffer from dyslexia, so I've always been good at business math, but I just forced myself to learn booleans and variables, and I can't. But I know some people, the people I worked, they're in front. I've never been one of those people that can just sit in front of a monitor for 8 hours, day after day after day after day, just doing hardcore coding. I can do it for a couple, I can...
No, nobody actually codes that way.
Oh, there are
people that do.
There are people who will intensely code, but usually it's like, you spend a lot of time thinking, and you spend a lot of time making notes, and then you spend and then you write some code, and then you debug it, and then you test it. You don't spend all day every day just writing code.
Yeah, the typing
is not the hard part. Sorry?
The typing is not the hard part.
Yeah.
There's a couple
it's
people...
all of this stuff.
There's a couple of people I was working at the Reno Collective. They just wanted to code hour after hour after hour.
That's because that's the easy part, right? When you know what you're doing, you just hash it out. I mean, I spent the summer writing assembly for a computer game. It's once it's mapped out, you just... But it's mind-numbing work because you're not actually doing any thinking. You're just rattling out logic sequences. I think maybe the most important part about your question, which is can anyone learn it, is anyone can learn it, but you have to make a decision about what you want to do because no one can learn everything. And I mean, especially in our field, there is no such thing. Like you asked, what is a developer? There's no such thing as a developer.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of subcategories of developer, just like there's a bunch of subcategories of designer or anything else. And in our industry, maybe one of the biggest problems we have right now is that people have often slotted down into a specialty very early on, and then they only know that one thing and nothing else. They have no idea what's going on outside, and they become completely devoted to this very narrow strip of whatever it is they know. And we could probably learn a lot from how doctors are being trained, because if you train to become a doctor, you have to do a full rotation, so you end up working at every single department in the hospital to understand what they do and understand how to classify a problem to a specific section, and how to talk to those people and relay information to them. And then later on, you decide what, you either decide or you are slotted into a specialty depending on your grades and what
I do understand where you're coming from there, but I also actually think there's, like most things to do with humans, there's pluses and minuses.
Yes, Aristotle, that's fine. The baker can only be a banker, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's not true. There are very few things... That's not true. There are very few things in our industry that only certain people can learn. However, there are certain things that are infuriatingly hard to understand unless you have the right mindset. And that mindset means that there are some types of jobs that require a very firm understanding of logic. Just like there are some parts of the work that require a very firm understanding of human behavior. And there are other parts that require a very firm understanding of aesthetics. And those things are not easy to teach unless you have some sort of baseline that comes from when you're a child. So you have to your brain has to be wired for it from childhood to be able to do it. And, but that's just a matter of a broad spectrum education of children to get everyone ready for it.
Yeah, I do understand what you mean. I just want to ask a quick
I think
question.
I'm gonna respond to you. I think that
Yeah,
you don't have to actually code to be a developer. I think that you just have to have a clear.
What? What?
That's heresy.
Oh, you
Oh
get
my
that.
God, Almighty! You
No, like
Did you say
know,
Lego?
install WordPress or whatever. I think that the first and most important thing about that is just having a clear thinking, being able to, maybe not advanced logic, but like basic logic, being able to model a business domain. So if you've primarily worked on the business side, you need to be able to describe how your business works in order to be able to build a program that does something to help your business. So that's an extremely valuable skill, and it's not related to programming, and you don't have to learn what the semicolons are. And I don't think that, if you're dyslexic, that's not something that would stop you from being able to do those things.
Well, I actually like it. Actually, I had some people I've got all my libraries and I've got all my, and it disappears. And actually, it's logical. Actually, people don't realise it's to do with Chomsky. I think people learn language, and because it's a natural process, they dismiss the madness of, especially English, how crazy language it is. But when it comes to actual programming, it's a relief for me. It has some logic to it, where English has no logic at all. Absolutely.
Well,
none.
English is much more difficult than a lot of languages because it is such a mishmash of imports from other languges, and
It's just
so
a total mess, Sally.
it's
You're
not
so right.
consistent.
No, none at all. Absolutely none. I was going to ask John. It's a little bit off track, but I'm just dying to get this from you, John. There's a lot of people where I work with that just love Genesis, and I've got a very I've tried to learn a bit of it, and I've got nothing against it because I'm really impressed with the quality of people in the Genesis world. They're especially female developers and just the quality of people in general. But I kind of wonder, because they use all these filters and actions. And to me, it's just paralleling. 5 years ago, where WordPress was at a certain level, it made logic to me. But now, I think WordPress has moved on a bit, and I just think it's adding another level of complexion that you don't really need. But I'm in such two minds because other people say, if you put your head down and you learn it, it's the bee's knees. But you don't. You've stayed away from it. Have you been tempted, or what? Maybe you can give some feedback about it.
It's crossed my mind. It's just it's not anything that I've done like a deep dive into with Genesis. With regular vanilla WordPress, you can definitely add like actions and filters as well. But I think I'm more in the camp that you are. That when I first learned it, I didn't come to WordPress like through Genesis, and I just came to WordPress through vanilla WordPress. And I think for me that's like easy. And as somebody like Bill, they find Genesis like very easy, and I think a lot of people in the WordPress community like Genesis. And I think you should just use whatever tool works best for you. And I think Genesis is.
I like to clarify that bit with Bill.
Yeah.
Bill can speak for himself, but he uses this thing called Dynamic, which is great. It's a great tool. But I have pointed out to Bill that Dynamic and Genesis are obviously totally linked, but it's also very different. But yeah, I understand where you come from.
You stick with one thing. For me, I don't want to produce and get things out for mostly podcasting.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's totally. And I think the tool that he's using to allow Bill to do that, he took some advice from our WordCamp, and it was a great choice. Anca, what's your? Because you said you're going in the Genesis route. What has led you to decide that?
Well, I chose Genesis because it has Infusionsoft. Well, I chose Genesis primarily because it's structured in the way that my mind works. So their approach to your WordPress page is rendered in this way, and this information comes first, and then this thing, and then here is your content, and before the content you do this, and then there's a loop, and inside the loop, blah, blah, blah. All of that stuff is just kind of how I think.
Oops.
Oh, is she frozen?
Oh,
she's
back.
Well, it's the first time Genesis, what's going on here. But once I kind of grokked the flow of what it was doing, and then where I could put the stuff that I wanted to put, it's been really, really, really great. And I think it's definitely made it faster for me to develop some of the sites that I do develop. But I can work without it if the type of site that I'm building calls for it. So I feel like yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some real benefits because you do get that library of pre-designed themes. There's a big community. You're dealing with more consistent, maybe style of coding than if you go to a general marketplace. There are definitely obvious benefits, but also I think you put it well. It's got to fit into the way that your mind works. I actually think if you've done it using vanilla, it actually makes it a little. You got then really commit to yourself, and you think, why should I bother? But I think that's your choice, isn't it? What's your to finish off? What's your feelings about this, Morton?
About Genesis?
Yeah, go on. Don't be outrageous, but just say what you feel.
Don't be outrageous.
No, be outrageous.
Be outrageous. We're gonna.
Genesis is a framework you can use to build websites on top of WordPress. It's just a framework. It's fine. I don't have an issue with it. It's. I think, regardless of what framework you're using, we're going to undergo a massive transformation in our community over the next 2 years. And I'm very curious to see what that ends up being, because one of the major challenges for people when they moved from static to dynamic content through content management systems was that all of a sudden everything got abstracted, and with APIs and JavaScript enabled apps, the abstractification, that's totally an English word, the abstract. I don't know. It gets abstractified. Oh, my brain is so not working.
The jet lag's getting to you.
It
You
becomes
don't know
more
where you are,
abstracted.
do you?
It makes everything more abstracted because all of a sudden even the functions that are happening are usually happening in multiple different files at the same time, and the development becomes more disjointed. And for the people who work with WordPress on a development level, meaning they actually write about the code, it'll become more challenging simply because of how everything fits together. Now, that's not to say it's harder to learn. It's just a different way of thinking. And I think that's kind of where everything comes together. Like the difference between using WordPress, a pure WordPress, or some sort of framework, either Genesis or something else, is you are approaching it in a different way, and you frame your mind in a different way. And that's also why it's hard to get out of a framework once you're in it. You simply structure the way you think about it in a certain way. Now, when you throw an API on top of that, and you all of a sudden get all these other things, then all that goes out the window because it's a whole new way of approaching everything. And I think adoption for things like the API will depend largely on the willingness of the community to re-educate itself and to break out of its current parameters, because it's very safe and easy to work within what you already know. And you've invested a lot of time learning it, and then throwing it out and learning something completely different will take time and effort that a lot of people will have to make a decision whether or not they want to do. And you're doing the full climb again from the bottom all the way up. And in addition, you have to reframe the way your brain thinks about certain things to get to learn this new, completely different way of doing things.
I see exactly where you're coming from, Morton, but I'll just say it's also, it's also your client base, the price. I understand why people really get in, because it's a quality framework from a quality theme shop, and it's got great smaller community, and you've got the cost base. You know, it's always around the commercial pressures with best practice, and there's always a tension there, and that's where I think. So I just want to ask Anca what what courses, what things are planned for her centre in the coming months, because she's been a great sport coming on the show. So would you like, what are your plans for the centre in the next year, and what's new, what's coming up?
Well, so my current mission is to figure out and create learning experiences that help people learn how to use WordPress to build business applications. So whether it's like a storefront or some kind of a management system of various sorts, and not everything is going to work with WordPress, obviously. But I think that
what? Not possible, is it?
Yeah, man. I think WordPress is simple enough, but it can be infinitely complex. But it's simple enough that somebody can use it as a tool to build a business application out of parts. So you might use a plugin that gets you data from a third-party service that then you can use in WordPress. So like Infusionsoft, I definitely want to talk more about that with Bill some other time. But
he seems to have died on us. He started coughing and he disappeared somewhere. I'm not sure what's happened. So.
But yeah, like you see Infusionsoft, Salesforce, LinkedIn, like all of these data sources that people can extract data from. As people get more and more used to using the WordPress API and then using JSON data, they're going to be pulling in all kinds of different interesting things into their websites. And that's the point where somebody who's a small business owner can have the same level of sophistication in how they interact with their customers online that Amazon spent millions and millions of dollars for in 1999. So I think the reason I'm committed to WordPress is partly because I see it as this framework that it's like a dessert topping and a floor wax that can do all of the things in between, and with a little bit of mental gymnastics and reshaping your thought process, as Morton said, you can use WordPress to do many kinds of things that you don't have to build from scratch anymore.
Can you say that again? The floor wax? That was really original.
It's a Saturday Night Live sketch from
the floor wax for the
maybe the 80s. It was like there's a couple arguing about whether this stuff in a spray can called Shimmer was a dessert topping or a floor wax, and it was both.
Oh, thank you for that. I thought that was really original. But from a student of MIT, you should expect that, shouldn't you? That's all right, folks. I think it's time to wrap this up. I think we've covered some interesting stuff, and hopefully our viewers have got some, of education and training in general. And I think I try to keep it on topic, and I think we have contributed some interesting discussion here. And thanks, Anca. I keep messing your name up, and I do apologise. But you've been a great sport, and I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, folks. Cut it, Bill, the wizard.
Cut it? Okay.
Cut
it. Cut it. Cut. Say goodbye,
Bye,
YouTube.
everyone.
Bye, YouTube.
Bye.
Stay on for a second. We'll cut it. Bye, YouTube.